Good evening, everyone. Welcome to AVPN's first South Asia Impact Capital Festival. I'm Hiral Sarvaiya Chauhan, Manager Partnerships at AVPN, and your MC for this session. I'm delighted to have you join us today. For those of you who do not know about AVPN, we are a network of funders and resource providers with 600 members across 32 markets. The main mission of AVPN is to move more capital towards impact. We do the same by connecting funders with different stakeholders across markets, providing them the opportunity to learn and lead through various opportunities. The South Asia Impact Capital Festival focused on health in the previous week. We now have the focus on livelihoods. The next 2 weeks will be focused on education and climate action. A few instructions before we go to the program. Before we go to the program proper. Please feel free to put up your questions in the Q&A pod. The session will be recorded and will be available for all of you to view for 3 weeks after this. We begin this session now after having an exhaustive session on youth, tier 2, tier 3 cities, and also understanding various approaches in livelihoods within agriculture. We now move towards an empathy-led approach in agriculture. Improving agricultural practices is a function of overcoming structural, supply side, as well as demand side barriers. While it is important to ensure continuous stream of inputs, along with the use of relevant technologies and know-how, many of the barriers to appropriate and modern farming practices are behavioral in nature. Overcoming such barrier warrants adopting an empathy-led lens, which involves experiencing the world from farmers' perspective and taking a closer look at the way they process information and make decisions. Before we move on to the panel, we are also sharing highlights of our day live on Twitter. So do not forget to share your experience with us by using the hashtag AVPN South Asia 2021 and hashtag social impact. We have an esteemed panel amongst us to shed more light on how the behavior change solutions can innovate and enhance agriculture. A warm welcome to all the speakers. Allow me to introduce you to our moderator, Jayesh Bhatia from NRMC. Jayesh is the founding director of NRMC and has over 25 years of experience leading multicultural and multi-agency teams in delivering complex assignment for various multilateral and bilateral donors in India, South Asia, and Africa. He has provided technical inputs in the sectors of natural resource management, water conservation, sanitation, and rural livelihoods. Jayesh, over to you, please.
Thank you, Hiral. A pleasure this evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen, friends. I'm Jayesh Bhatia, as Hiral said, founder and a director at NRMC. Over the last almost 18 years that we've been working in this field, one of the kind of three tenets
Jayesh, are you there?
Yeah, it's not audible.
Yes, we lost you out. You blipped for a while. That's the tech challenge. Power, I guess.
Yeah, I think Jayesh is back.
Yeah, she's back.
Yeah, sorry. Technological limitations tell me that I should get a job. But this unit that we set up really looks at the issue of communications, behavioral communication, how behaviors influence impact and engagement of different stakeholders into different interventions. And we thought that it would be at this South Asia, festival organized by AVPN, we should really be looking at does behavior really impact and how do we influence the efficacy and efficiency of investments that are getting into the agricultural sector per se. With me is a very esteemed panel. Anish and I go back almost 28 years. We were batchmates at Indian Institute of Forest Management starting in 1992. And, that friendship has evolved. And of course, we worked together, argued together, and fought together. But happy to have Anish, who leads on TRI Foundation in India and is path-breaking in the work that he does at scale. We are also joined by Nilima Khitan. Most of you friends would know her work at Seva Mandir or in the academics at IRMA or at different large corporates leading the CSR mantle for them. Now she is managing partner with most consultants based out and currently speaking today from Udaipur. Last but not the least, we have Dhruvi, who again I've had the privilege to work with over many years. And Dhruvi currently leads the Axis Bank Foundation and would bring in a huge amount of experience and expertise on the specific topic that we are today. So let me start with that. A question to Anish. Anish, in terms of this whole aspect of behavioral change, empathy, do you see, based on your own experience, how does it help? How do you really look at and taking and trigger change at scale that I know TRIF is really working towards?
Thank you very much, Jayesh. Now that you refer to our association of last 28 years, let me draw in experience early on in my career. I had to contextualize our conversation today. When there was this twin village, Karikado Makunda, beautiful verdant it was perched on a rolling country with flowing river nearby. And the crop fields were fallow. Almost all families would migrate for work as farmhands to Bengal, thinking that, I was at Pradhan then, and we thought families have very good transplanted paddy cultivation skills. We installed lift irrigation, a very effective lift irrigation, drawing water from the flowing river. And families continued to migrate. And more disturbingly, they had now mortgaged their now productive irrigated crop fields to the local moneylenders. In some ways, it begs a question, why did this happen? Women and men who were very, very proficient with technology couldn't work on their own fields. So to be a good farmer is not just about land, skills, water. It's also about identity, self-belief, efficacy that you refer to, Jayesh, that I can be a good farmer and can take risks of farming. There is another context, and we are a very interesting sort of paradox that we have here in India. Bihar is one of the fastest growing economy. It grew at close to 13% plus in the last decade. Very good farm sector growth. It won from Government of India 6 Krishi Kaman awards consecutively for productivity gains on rice, wheat, corn. The state but has the poorest farmers, earning barely 1/5 of what a Punjabi farmer earns. Most households migrate outside the state. So what it tells is aggregate growth, aggregate farm growth. Productivity is not indicative of family level well-being. So roughly, if we were to talk of India, 150 million farmers, and again, the numbers are disputed, anything between 90 million to 150 million. But that's a pretty large number. 1/3 of them are farmers just in name. There's very little farm income for these farmers. The top 30% as we speak are on roads, and the middle 30%, which is resource endowed, today is actually grappling with exploding indebtedness, net deficits year after year, and what you could say a subsistence mindset. This leads to what psychologists typically describe as cognitive tunneling. We did an exercise to categorize this segment, and mind you, this is very large, 50 million of them, looking at their holdings, skills, the agriculture setting in traditional or more modern agriculture setting, 3 sets, aspirational, traditionalist, and survivalist. So they require to create any impact technology introduction, and that must grapple with these personas of aspirant, a traditionalist, or a survivalist. We need to design processes to break free of this quote unquote skeptic mindset. Today, that's the big challenge of farm sector in India, and just that's where I think the topic of our conversations today is very relevant. So today, to my mind, the farm sector challenge is one of lost middle, which is the focus of NGOs, and Dhruvi and Nilima have worked in this space. They would say we have produced very mixed results. And one of the reasons to my mind is we haven't explored how to light that fire in the belly, self-efficacy you talked about. It's truly about getting first to cultivate the mind before we talk of cultivating the field. It's about mindset shifts, about behavior change, and about going beyond fear. To external agents, someone like me, that lighter to this cultivating mind is empathy. You can't move intrinsic issues which drive rational emotive behaviors without stimulating, so to say, that center fresh ad, batti jala de. So in that, without that, you will not be able to, move the needle. So, and that's true with any human-centered work. Empathy plays the most critical role. If you have to get farmers to believe, walk the talk, being farmers, you require to solve this challenge of farmers in Bihar, football field size farmers, or the farmers of Karikado Mukunda who didn't believe in themselves. Fortunately, Almighty has endowed all of us with a fund of empathy. We need to discover, surface, and deploy it as we build, better farming, better societies. So that's how I have looked at, this whole issue of farming, at creating scale impact, behavior change, to empathy-led approaches, and that's my reflection. Thanks.
Thanks. Brilliant as always, Anish. Let me move to Nilima in terms of, I do know, given your work at different institutions and work, more bottom-up planning, we do know that the behaviors or the ecosystem within which the farmers work does influence their decision making, or influences their decision. What aspects do you really see where communication and engagement and empathy and efficacy, how do we influence that in the current context that we are in?
Thank you, Jayesh, and thank you very much. And I would like to build on, in my response, also build on, I think, some of the points that Anish touched. So first, I think, Jayesh, like you said, I think one thing that I would like to say, many of us, I'm sure all of us, have been often faced with such perplexing puzzles which made no sense in the field. Why is a farmer making a choice which makes no logical sense, even from his perspective or from an external perspective? Certainly it seems to make no sense. Like Anish said about fallow fields, I have seen similarly barren land lying around Udaipur and farming, it's undulating land. But then when you scratch the surface, you realize that maybe there are certain other issues. One, of course, was land rights. And I think land rights is an issue that we've realized, at least in my work, Jayesh, I realized that in many contexts, maybe you will not get the full ownership or buy-in of the farmers. Some of these really fundamental issues are not addressed. That's one kind of challenges that we worked on. The second kind of challenge, I think, I don't know if Anish referred to that or not, but certainly we found that the ecosystem, there needs to be, apart from the behavior, but the two are linked, and that's what I will just say, that there is also the ecosystem has to move in a particular way. So we were trying to shift farmers to more high priced or high value vegetables, instead of only doing chili and regular bhindi and chili. We wanted, Jayesh, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yes.
Okay, sorry. So we wanted to move farmers from moving from doing only bhindi and mirchi to more high value vegetable crops. And we realized that there was an ecosystem change, that if the saplings were not available, so if the supply side didn't exist, if the from both at the raw material end and the marketing end, the farmer was unlikely to take the risk, all of the risk on his shoulder, and then move his behavior according to, you know, what seemed to make more sense. And I want to end what I'm saying, Jayesh, with tying in with your empathy-led approaches. So one book, which I think one person's, two people's work, which I think speaks very much to this conversation that we are having, is Professor Senthil Mullainathan. I'm sure he's an economist, behavioral science economist. And he's written a book called Scarcity. And one point that he explains so well in that book is that how scarcity does not only mean that you take decisions of a certain kind, but it alters your mind. So whoever has, if you have scarcity of time, you have scarcity of money, you have scarcity of food, it alters your mind. And it of course he uses the word bandwidth, how your bandwidth gets affected, and therefore you take decisions in a different way. And one suggestion, so that's the analysis, but one suggestion which I want to end with, one of the suggestions that he says is that if you factor in the fact that, let's say, scarcity would have affected the way a farmer is thinking about decisions, then your design of interventions should be suited to factor in for those kinds of bandwidth issues at the farmer. So he talks a lot about, which we've also found, how design can be developed in such a way that where you are preempting or accounting for the fact the farmer may be more short-sighted in his choices, that the farmer may not be able to make a longer-term decision. So how program design can accommodate for those behavioral aspects at the farmer's end. So let me pause here.
That's absolutely brilliant, and kind of echoes with, I'm sure, all of our experiences. But we, as we get into, we've done a lot of work around design of large-scale multi-stakeholder programs, and there are two factors to it. One, that while all the stakeholder engagement that you do, for some reason, while it is getting finalized, you kind of tend to go with the established norms of how the projects would function, how the institution should be. And we somehow lose that connect of what we have, and farmers in the agricultural instance, or the primary stakeholders have told us. I think the second point that you did, or the first one around land tenure, and that again is absolutely critical. And I think there is, at the policy space, there is a lot of recognition now in terms of how secured tenure and land rights are really, really critical in terms of how farmers behave. So we do come back to that if time permits a little later. Moving to Dhruvi, given the work that ABF does across the country in different agroecological zones, working with the collectives and how things, do you think, in terms of the way programs have been designed, and I'm taking, just connecting what where Nilima ended, do the aspirations and how you design your programs, how effective does communication play a role in your view of the programs that you do manage and support?
So a lot of our work is centered around behavior change, and that comes after a lot of learnings that we've had. Is if you design a program sitting in a room and then take it to the field, it's not going to work, right? So your program design has to be based on what has worked with the community, on, more importantly, what are the processes that have been kind of designed to achieve certain kind of outcomes, and they do not really what works in one area may not necessarily work in another area. It is not a hub and spoke model. It does not work. It has to be customized. it has to be driven from the ground. You can't really decide, you can't pre-decide all of this, right? You have to create space in your program design, and I'm again talking from a very funder perspective here, is to be able to accommodate all of these factors, which means there is a lot of unpredictability there, because the learning curves of a farmer, whether it's a woman farmer, it's a man farmer, it's a youth, is dependent on the local circumstances, their own background, and the circumstances they face in that particular season, right? It also changes season to season. So, and COVID has taught us that is what worked in last year did not definitely work this year, right? So you can't really go with templated, you can have them in terms of, kind of good to have thing. But if you start working towards achieving those, and rather than looking at what is needed by the farmer or being asked by the farmer, you're designed to fail, right? So given the whole unpredictability of external factors which are not in our control, climate change, for example, rainfall patterns, migration now for change in the incomes with the farmer, in that unpredictability, you have to be able to function keeping all of that in mind. Again, sustainability, a very popular word. You need to have projects that sustain. One thing that will definitely sustain is the knowledge that has been transferred and sort of behavior change that you've triggered. If that happens, then other things start happening over a period of time, rather than going by a physical infrastructure kind of a thing, but without focusing on the capacities that you build around it of people.
Yeah, so true. In terms of while we, my team and our experience, almost across the country, from a scaling of the various initiatives or pilots, I think we've really, and I'm sure it will resonate with many others, that as you try and scale up, there are, of course, limitations in terms of capacities and in terms of capabilities, even if funds are adequately available. And there again, our experience when we distill it, we do find that projects and programs with a very strong double loop communication are able to scale up much better than the ones that have a limitation in terms of their communication strategy and communication approaches to this. Let me, once we do talk about capacities and capabilities, and Anish, very quickly, and followed on with Nilima and Dhruvi, on how do you really see in the current context where we are really looking at moving farmers from subsistence, at least at a wider goal level, moving farmers from subsistence to a more established, and remunerative farming. How does this skill gap and the role of technology play? Very quickly, given we have another 4 minutes to this panel.
So I'll try to do very quick. This is very complex. Subsistence is also, transmitted intergenerationally in terms of the mindset shifts it brings, the scarcity that Nilima talked about, or the cognitive tunneling it happens. So the way I have looked at agriculture, it's a tripod of, agroecology, market opportunities, and the farmer. The key is still the farmer, and where you look at all the interventions, be it state markets or these new laws, they have looked at the market piece of it. Or in the mid-90s, we looked at the watershed interventions, essentially on the agroecological. The farmer piece is centered around resource endowments is one part of it. Again, it's a tripod, where one part is resource endowments. The second part is the skill endowments that she has. And the third part is her aspirations. The skills and aspirations actually profile that farmer and her response to a technology and her response to a context. Whether we talk about contract farming or export-oriented farming. I see this aspect of the skills, aspirations, and the way the farmers engage with this in intersection with the resource endowments that she has is much less paid attention to. And that's one. If there was one silver bullet, if you were to say, and if there was a way for any of these things to go viral, solutioning, if it starts looking at farmer central to that piece, solutioning piece, you will find this going viral. Some of our work at TRF actually builds on that, creating solutions, looking at this kind of agri-ecology market farmer tripod and centering farmers where we look at skills and aspirations. So Jayesh, I will stop here.
Lovely, thanks, Anish. I think in terms of the work in Jharkhand is where we were partly worked with you. Just throw that light in terms of how do you really make that change and go to scale. It's just amazing, your piece of work. I think over to Nilima, in terms of how do you really see that we address this much needed skill gap, what's aspirational at a sectoral level in agriculture, and what we see on the ground with the farmers.
Yeah. Thank you, Jayesh. So without repeating, just underline one thing. Am I audible?
Yes, yes, you are.
I seem
yes.
to have. Okay. So I just want to, without repeating what Anish said, just want to add, I think, one thing in this tripod that Anish described. I think one thing that we need to also, Jayesh, be mindful of the fact is that agriculture is probably one of the most risky enterprises that any entrepreneur can get into. Most of the variables are out of the control of the farmer. And can we think of designs where some of those risks are taken away, or society begins to share some of those risks? It is tragic, whether it is a question of technology or otherwise, that even after 70 years, we have not been able to even bring on board a good kind of crop insurance mechanism, for example, to take care of the climate changes, etc. So I'm just saying, are there ways in which we can de-risk agriculture so that, and it is done by amongst the poorest people in the country, and they are undertaking the riskiest of occupations. So my only plea in this is that let's think of ways in which either use technology or other things to reduce the risk and let society begin to share some of those risks.
Fantastic. Thanks. Quickly to you, Dhruvi, in terms of, I'll lead you a little more, given your intrinsic links with Axis Bank, at the Axis Bank Foundation. Our experience, one of the questions at NIL, this behavioral science unit that we have, one of the questions that we started really looking at, why do the farmers don't bank with the banks? How do you, given your thought process and I'm just taking advantage of the previous discussion we had offline, that, how do you see this in the context of the current, discussions that we are having?
Yeah, so it's not about not banking with a bank. It's also about banking with who then, right? So where do they get the money from? And the channels that they use, which a lot of it is informal sources, even at a higher cost, is because of a history, a legacy, a relationship, right? So the farmer operates at a community level, not just as an individual, and the risks are shared at a community level. So these are safety nets, right? So for any financial institution to be able to replace that, right, you need to create safety nets for the farmer. You need to create those positive experiences, ease of doing the transaction. And I, being part of a bank, I can tell you that it is work in progress, right? It's not going to be, it's not a, safety net is not a product you develop, right? It's a relationship you develop. And it's also on the other side is about getting a farmer more equipped to understand their own finances, or rather, let's say financial literacy to simplify. So I think two of these things can to an extent write products, de-risking the farmer, and financial literacy can help the farmer start banking with formal financial institutions.
Lovely. I think because, in terms of the question really, just to say, was more coming in from given the large amount of interest on the private capital, and of course the public money that we do know gets invested into the agricultural sector. how do we really see these this discussion in that context as well? I think we're pretty getting close to it. Harsha, do we have any questions from the audience that we could potentially look up?
No, Jayesh, we don't have a question as of now, but I'll let you know if we do.
Okay. How are we doing for time? I think we are at...
yeah, we have 5 more minutes to go.
We have 5 more minutes. That gives us, kind of, again, from a perspective, drawing in you again, Anish, on where Dhruvi left. How much do you see in terms of financial literacy and the ability of individual farmers to engage with money as a resource? How does that work based on your experience?
So this budget, Minister announced, Honorable Finance Minister announced agri credit of 16 lakh crores. Mm-hmm. And, I'll be a Sambit Patra when I start counting those number of zeros that go with it. So it's just 16 lakh crores. The amazing thing about agriculture credit is if you were to pick up a 5-year cycle, three years are either surplus or deficit rainfall. What Nilima was saying, the kind of externality the farm economy has, it makes the whole credit delivery becomes very volatile. So before COVID, you had agriculture was the mother of volatile, uncertain, ambiguous, the VUCA world as they call it. So agriculture was that world, right? So I would say that unless we are able to, and that's where technology, de-risking the kind of things that Nilima said and it's not just India, globally also one has not been able to fix the farm, crop insurance game. And that's a really complex thing to do because of the elements that nature, has wins, so we'll have to look at technology. We'll have to look at institutions which can, increase this season to a year to a 5-year cycle. If you start looking at that, and then, building on from where we started, behavior change, the Kurt Levin's frame is one of person in interaction with environment. So let's look at the environment, which would include the statutory, the legal, and that's what, impinges on agriculture a lot in India. So that the legal escape there, the externalities related to the markets where, farmers are always sellers in the market. They have, they're always at the mercy of the market. So unless we start looking at it in totality and increase the length in which they start playing up, all these factors starts playing up, we'll not be able to make a dent. That's how I'll submit. But 16 lakh crore is one number and that's formal sector and, credit flowing in.
Yes.
That's not formal.
And increasing on the private sector side as well, with the kind of host of investments that we see in the social enterprises that are currently trying to service different aspects of the agricultural value chains. But yeah, kind of amazing discussion. I do see 2 questions that have popped up. One is, what are the most successful empathy-led communication, and how does new models of behavioral solution enhance the efficacy of public-private investments? I think in terms of the interest of time, I do know, and I'll try and answer that to my limited ability and experience on all of this. I think in terms of the kind of investments and impact that we've seen both in the health sector per se, on adoption, the communication and empathy-led communication that have gone in, whether in the case of maternal and childcare, or also in case of a lot of intervention on HIV and AIDS that has really been led, empathy-led. The aspects, and there are science-based, behavioral science-based solutions that have really worked very well in this whole public health sphere. The other aspects in terms of the question is, how does new models of behavioral solution? I think it's in terms of, as I said earlier, the way that I perceive communication and behavioral change communication to be very important is, to what Dhruvi also alluded to, that and what Nilima said, within that ecosystem, how do we ensure that the primary stakeholder in the agricultural sector being the farmer, how they sustain onto the entire life cycle, growing from year to year, rather than, as Anish said, come back to ground zero after every 3 years or 2.5, 3 years, given the vagaries of nature and the externalities that Nilima talked about. So definitely in terms of the overall space, I'm very convinced that behavioral change communication do need to factor in, and thanks to the panelists, Anish, Nilima, and Dhruvi on sharing this. I think we do need to end here. A very good evening, and to the participants who have taken time off to be with us. Thank you so much, and thanks again to AVPN and the panel here for engaging on this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jayesh, UVPN,
Yeah, thanks,
and everyone.
Jayesh.
Thanks.
Thank you, Jayesh.
Thanks. Bye.
Yeah.
Thank you very
Thanks,
much.
Jayesh. It was a very insightful session. The key takeaways, I think, are it's important to cultivate a mindset change before we cultivate the fields, to having the importance of financial literacy while engaging with farmers, and how an empathy-led approach in agriculture has a huge potential to scale. So with these takeaways, we are at the close of the day 1 of Livelihoods. And at this moment, we would like to thank the kind support of our festival partners, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, Sesame Workshop, the Rockefeller Foundation, COVID Action Collab, VNV Advisory Services, British Asia Trust, WPP India CSR Foundation, Catalyst Management Services, and Satwa. Do share your highlights of this session on social media, and please tag us using the hashtag AVPN South Asia 2021 and hashtag social impact. Thank you all and have a great night.
Thank you, Hiral. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.